Hey there everybody, Sage Popham here, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. And in this week's episode of the blog, I want to talk about our number one fear as herbalists, right? But before I talk about our number one fear, I want to talk about our number one goal, right? And it's pretty obvious, right? Our number one goal as herbalists is to provide healing for people, right? But that then translates into, for most of us, our number one fear, which is hurting someone with herbs, right? That obviously we want to help, we want to heal, we want to provide plants for people that's going to rejuvenate their body and alleviate their suffering. And for the evolutionary herbalists out there, we want to also help, clarify and inspire the mind and uplift and strengthen the heart and facilitate in the soul's growth and development, right? And the very last thing that we want to do is potentially give someone an herb that's going to do harm to their body, right? And that really is, one of the foundation of, traditional Western medicine, which is the number one axiom: first, do no harm. And so this is a totally valid fear, right, that we have, because I think it shows that we're coming from a good place, right, that we genuinely want to do good. But here's the deal with most herbal medicines that we're giving, right, that if you're working with the majority of medicinal plants used, especially in our Western materia medica, and you're giving them in, moderate doses, like you're not giving them, ginormous 5 milliliters 5 times a day dosages for months and months and months and months, the likelihood of you actually inflicting harm on someone is incredibly low. Like, insanely low, right? And so this is something that's really important, because that's one thing that stops a lot of people from helping another person with herbs, right? Is that they're like, well, I don't know enough, or I don't really understand how much to give, and I really don't want to hurt them, right? And that's good to think that way, but I always like to encourage my students that the likelihood of you actually doing that is pretty low. Now, one of the things, there's kind of a couple different orientations to take when we look at how an herbal medicine is actually working in the body, right? So on the one hand, we have the herb's very distinct physiological or biochemical effects, right? Where the plants have certain medicinal constituents that are traveling through the body and working through our own internal biochemistry and adjusting the physiological processes in the body. The other side of how an herb works is through their energetics, right? Through kind of how the herb adjusts the ecosystem of the body, and looking at those primary factors of energetics of people and plants being like temperature, hot and cold, moisture, moistening or drying, and then their action on the tone of tissues, whether they're tightening or whether they're relaxing. And when we're looking at that energetic side of things, this is really kind of the main area where we might get the wrong remedy, right? Where maybe someone is too hot and we give them a formula that's got, thyme and oregano and turmeric and cayenne. And it's like, whoa, that formula was a little too warming for their constitution, for their tissue state, and it might be slightly aggravating to that, right? Now, a constitutional or tissue state aggravation, is important to look at, right? This is an important factor for being a holistic herbalist, right? We've got to look at those things, but it's not like gonna kill them, right? I mean, it's not gonna inflict serious harm in the short term, right? It might shift their body a little bit in one direction or another, but if you're doing follow-ups with people, you're following up with them, maybe a couple days later or a week later, and you're saying, okay, how are these herbs doing? How are they feeling? What's going on? And they're like, yeah, I just feel like, the burning pain in my ulcer got a little bit worse. And it's like, okay, like, yeah, that sucks to hear feedback like that as an herbalist. But remember, it's a teaching, right? It's helping to clarify what is going on with that person, right? In last week's blog episode, I was talking about that story about me being at a workshop with Michael Tierra, right? And how he was mentioning that the remedy that you give is part of your assessment and evaluation. Like, when you give a remedy, how the person reacts to it gives you more information to further clarify and refine your understanding of what's going on with them, and to clarify what remedies are going to be appropriate and potentially inappropriate, right? And it's going to happen, right? I mean, I don't know a single herbalist or practitioner that has given the right remedy on the first go every time with every client. Like, it's gonna happen, right? You're gonna get it wrong. So I think as herbalists, it's important for us to recognize that, to accept that, and to take it in as a teaching, right? And to not beat ourselves up and get hard on ourselves and think we're worthless and we don't know what we're doing and we should just, go back to our day job if you're doing this as a career, right? It's like, you're not gonna get it right every time. And so this is why doing follow-ups relatively quickly, I think, is really good, because you can get that immediate feedback and that immediate information about how they responded to the remedy or the formula, and you can adjust it as needed. But really, a constitutional aggravation isn't going to turn into like a major pathology or disease in a short-term window of time. And they can usually be corrected relatively quickly, right? Just by adjusting your formula. So it's like, oh, okay, I gave this remedy and it maybe aggravated their temperature or their moisture. Okay, well, we're just gonna change it out, right? We're gonna rearrange this formula. Maybe we'll add in some more cooling herbs or take out some of the warming herbs, or make sure we add a demulcent yin tonic herb to moisten the formula up, because, maybe their sinuses and mouth and eyes and skin's getting dried out all of a sudden from all the drying herbs that we're giving them. So you can pretty quickly correct those constitutional dynamics in your formula, and I think that's one of the most important ways to make sure that we're giving the right remedy, right? Now, the other big one here in terms of kind of this fear of harming someone is the potential for herb-drug interactions, right? This is a huge subject. This is an important subject for the practicing herbalist, because, let's face it, a lot of people out there are on prescription medications. And so we have to be aware of those remedies that might potentially interact with those medications. Now, the thing about this, and when I was studying at Bastyr University, we did a whole semester focused on herb-drug interactions, right? So this is something that I've studied a lot. I had a great teacher in the subject, Dr. Eric Yarnell, who's an amazing naturopath, really great herbalist and clinician. And one of the things that he said is like, look, yes, some herbs definitely have adverse reactions with medications, but for the most part, most herbs don't, right? But there's a certain handful of remedies that do, and you just need to be aware of that. The big example here is St. John's wort, right? St. John's wort, it does interact with a number of prescription medications, and that's primarily because it's a liver remedy, right? We tend to think of St. John's wort like, oh, it's an herb for depression, but really it's a liver remedy, right? It's actually detoxifying the liver through what they call the cytochrome P450 detoxification pathway. And what happens with St. John's wort is that it's actually helping the body to metabolize that drug more quickly so that it's going to be less effective. So, another example is how hawthorn and things like motherwort and things like that can help to lower blood pressure, right? But if someone's on blood pressure medication, because the herb is doing the same thing as the drug, it might drop their blood pressure too low, And we don't want to do that, right? But if we really take it from my perspective, it's like, oh, if the herb is doing the same thing that the drug is doing, then we can drop the dosage of the drug, right? And hopefully, potentially be able to wean someone off of their prescription medications, right? And especially if the client wants to do that, then that's great, right? But of course, that now we're starting to get in tricky territory, right? So just for clarity's sake, I never tell clients to stop taking their prescription meds. I never tell them to reduce their dosage. I don't touch people's drugs, right? And I encourage you to never do that as well. You're getting into risky territory there. What I do and tell my clients to do is talk to their doctor about it. And I say, hey, go talk to your doctor. Tell them you want to start working with herbs. Tell them you don't want to be taking these drugs anymore. You want to wean off. And if your doctor laughs at you or scoffs at you, then you need to go find a new doctor, right? It's like, remember, you're hiring them, like you're the boss. You're in charge. And if you're seeing a doctor that isn't able to work in kind of your paradigm of how you want to do things, then I always encourage my clients, in a kind, gentle, compassionate way, to try to find a physician that is a little more open-minded to natural medicine and is more open to helping them to wean off of their drugs. And actually, I know there's some doctors that's their specialty, right? That their specialty is to get people reduce their medications. And and just on that note of prescriptions, one thing that I've been doing in my clinical practice is when someone comes to me with their primary complaints, and if they're on certain prescription medications, what I'll do is I'll go look up those drugs in reference books or online. There's some great materials online. And what I'll do is I'll write down all the side effects of those medications, right? All the known side effects of all the medications. And then I compile them into a list, and then I put it right next to their primary complaint. And it's actually amazing to see how often, like I would say probably 90% of the time, people's primary complaints are drug side effects, right? And so again, I'm not telling them what to do. I just provide information and I say, look, I don't know if you're aware of all the side effects of your medication, but I compiled a list and I'll provide references for people to double check me just if they want that. And I just say, it's looking like a lot of your main complaints are actually side effects of the medications that you're taking, and you might consider talking to your doctor about this. So I know this is kind of like a little side note on how to, not do harm with the herbs that we give, but, this conversation of, people's prescription medications is a big part of that. But again, for the most part, if you're working with gentle, mild, kind of the standard herbal remedies that we use as herbalists, most of them actually don't interact in adverse ways with prescription medications. Now, on this note of herb-drug interactions, it's not like you have to memorize all the drugs and all the herbs every drug interacts with, right? I mean, this is a constantly changing environment. There's always new drugs coming out. There's always new research being done. So one thing that I always encourage my students to do is just get good reference materials on this subject. There's a book, I think it's just called Herb-Drug Interactions by, I believe, Francis Brinker. And that was one of our main textbooks at Bastyr for this subject. That book is constantly being updated, so you can find that on Amazon for cheap. Make sure you get the most recent edition, and if someone's on a drug, you just look it up in the book and see what it interacts with. And if it interacts with any of the herbs that you want to give them, don't give them that herb, right? And you can usually find a way around it, right? That's the beauty of herbal medicine, is that there's a lot of plants that have a lot of properties, and some of them have crossover. So, if we want to detoxify someone's liver, and we wanted to give them St. John's wort in a formula, but St. John's wort interacts with one of their meds, give them a different remedy to detoxify their liver, right? We've got tons of liver detoxifying remedies that you can still use to help them, but won't interact with their medications. So I just wanted to share this because it's a really big topic these days. And, like I said, as herbalists, we want to help, we want to heal. The last thing we want to do is potentially hurt someone. But I'm just here to tell you that the likelihood of that happening is actually really low if you're using safe, gentle, mild to moderate strength herbs, and you are just diligent about getting all the information about what people are putting in their body every day, over the counter or prescription, and you've got some good reference materials on how to look up what herbs are going to be potentially contraindicated in the use of that drug. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity. Hopefully that provides a little bit of relief for those of you that might have a little bit of fear in terms of working with people on prescriptions, or just the fear of hurting someone with the remedies that you give. So if you're watching this anywhere but our blog, be sure to head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com. We've got tons of free videos, tons of free training and content over there. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, be sure to click the subscribe button. We also got our podcast at the Plant Path on iTunes and Stitcher. So that's how to be tuned into all the work and free offerings that we do here at the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. We've got our Facebook page and Instagram page too for daily updates and inspiration on this plant path. So thanks so much for tuning in to this new episode. And until next time, take care and be well.